Welcome to the Titans of Palm Beach with your host, Jay Oliver, on 95.9 and 106.9, the True Oldies channel. Talking with the movers and shakers that make South Florida as amazing as it is. Now, here's your host, Jay Oliver.
And a very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Jay Oliver here indeed. You are listening to another edition of Titans of the Palm Beaches, in which we examine movers and shakers of this great town. It could be in so many different areas, folks, in the business sense, sports, entertainment, medical, political. Did I say political? Well, guess what? We are in line to speak to a candidate. He is running in the 20th congressional primary, and that is taking place on November the 2nd. And we are within that 7-week mark. It is hard to believe, and that's what happens, after Labor Day, it just kind of streamlines, and that's the case. I am graced with the presence of Mike Termott. He is running for Congress in the 20th. That's the Elsie Hastings spot, the iconic Congressman Hastings who passed away earlier in the year. Mike is representing the Libertarian Party. Mike Termott, welcome to the Oldies Channel radio studios.
Thank you, Jay, and thank you for correcting my prior belief that the only reason I was invited here is because I am an oldie. I appreciate you clarifying that, just a matter of music.
You see, that's where I always make my mistake, and I will correct it from here on, because it is the greatest hits of yesteryear.
And you do. Good for you. No. You do play the greatest hits. We're not going to get into a debate about whether or not there have been truly great hits made in the last 20 years. So.
We could use a couple, the ballads and everything else. I don't know what's happened to music, but that's a whole nother show. Maybe you could join me.
I miss
on
the
that
60s and the 80s.
No, I tell you. Libertarian Party, Congress, the 20th. Give me a little background on Mike Termott.
Well, I'll give you a little bit of background because I am an oldie. I better give you the condensed version. I'm a police officer. I've been on patrol for...
By the way, it's a pleasure to meet you. No, I'm only kidding.
Yeah, if the program doesn't run its entire half an hour, it's because Jay had to escort the back of my car.
Yes.
I've been on patrol the past 11 and a half years. It's been a second career for me. I work for the city of Hallandale Beach in southern Broward County. It's a very diverse community. It's been a very rewarding experience for me.
Well, you're an active police officer.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
11 and a half years.
I'm in my 12th
Beach.
year right now, and I'll be leaving the force in a couple of months to campaign full time.
There you go.
Yeah. And like I say, it's a second career for me.
What turned the tables for you as far as the political landscape is concerned?
Well,
you had enough?
Decided,
you know what, I need to make a change.
You do get fed up, and there are plenty of things to be fed up about. I think each one of your listeners will probably have a different reason for being fed up, but I don't think too many of your listeners are going to say they love the way the politics works today in the United States. Like most libertarians, I think you spend a certain number of years rooting for one party or the other, hoping that they will stop disappointing you, hoping that at some point they'll start representing your interests and your philosophies. And at some point you just realize either that's just not going to happen or they're actually going the wrong direction. And I think that happened for me in a lot of ways for the Republican Party and for the Democratic Party both.
When you say Libertarian Party, a lot of people say, wait a minute, I thought we talk only about Republicans and Democrats here. Sometimes I hear about the independent, but people who are listening who might be newbies into the field of politics. Can you explain the representation of the Libertarian Party, my friend?
I will, and thank you. I'm glad that you don't merely discuss Republicans and Democrats. The Libertarian Party is the third largest party in the United States. No, we don't have as many members as the two, what we would call legacy parties. We believe in putting first and foremost and primarily the protection of your rights as individuals, as citizens, as human beings, as being the number one most important function of government.
Shouldn't that be either way? I mean, when you think about it, a representative of the people is one that fights for the rights of the people.
We believe so. We believe that both parties have compromised our rights for different reasons, typically, right? But clearly, each party has its own axe to grind in terms of using the government to advance the interests of one group or another. And we believe the government ought to be smaller, have a lighter touch, be less intrusive, just to play a smaller role in our lives. You know, with the big exception that the role of government is to protect us from those who would take our rights, and importantly, protect us from government itself. One of the things that libertarians have been a little bit upset about lately in the context of COVID, for example, you know, a lot of us are very pro-vaccine and pro-mask, but we're not too happy about the government assuming it has the authority to require us to do anything, but in this case, to forcing us to wear a mask or forcing us to get vaccinated, things like that. Whereas,
or maybe forcing not to enforce mask rules, as what we have seen from Tallahassee over the last month.
Well, that's right. And I think you've got the battle of what we would characterize as authoritarians. You know, we believe that it ought to be, for example, the school board ought to be deferring to parents in terms of whether the children wear masks or not. If I were sending my kid to school these days, I would probably put a mask on him. My kids are older, so I don't have to make that decision. I'm pretty sure, though, that if I were to call my 27-year-old and told her to wear a mask, she would tell me to go pound sand. But I do think that a 27-year-old mother ought to have the right to make that decision for her child. Now, the school board, the next step up, has assumed it has the authority to tell people whether or not to wear masks, and that's a point of contention. And then you have an authoritarian governor who says that it's his authority to tell the school board that it can't do that. And I got to be honest with you, I don't even agree with that. I just don't think the governor has the authority to tell the school board what to do or what not to do. And then, as though that weren't enough of a food fight, we have the President of the United States who thinks that he has the authority to tell the governor that he doesn't have the authority to tell the board that it doesn't have the authority
one massive food
to tell parents that they don't have the authority to make up their own mind about their kids.
And we've got sandwiches and pies flying all over this cafeteria right now. So in essence, now, are you more of a data and science type guy? Do you look at numbers as far as a requirement to say, you know what, this is a district that might want to subscribe to that? As far as,
if I were to look at the data about this district, I'm pretty sure that I would come to the conclusion that we're not going to collect a lot of votes here. I'm optimistic that we're going to get some attention, though. Part of the reason
only because we know it's what Mike is saying. It's very heavily Democratic.
Yeah, well, exactly. Traditionally, this is one of the bluest districts in the United States.
Exactly.
It's gerrymandered ridiculously to make it so. It's a wonderful district, wonderful, wonderful people in all kinds of different ways. It's a diverse district, but it is a district that was put together to be as blue as possible. Indeed, 2 elections ago, the Republicans didn't run anybody at all, so you know how they feel about it. But as a libertarian, as a member of the party, we feel quite strongly that it's our not just opportunity, but obligation to get in the race and pass the word and let people know
about the party and what
about
you
the
represent,
party,
right?
what we represent,
Right.
and that markets left without the government interfering every 5 minutes can actually make our lives better. That a government with a lighter touch can allow you to build the kind of life that you want to lead without leaving you high and dry. That a lighter touch in general from the government aside, like I say, from protecting your rights, is indeed the way to go.
There you go. Now, I'm sure in this flight of campaign that you are hitting doors, banging on doors, not making arrests.
We're not making arrests.
Not issuing warrants, but issuing your message. How has it been received?
It's been received well. We have been banging on some doors, and I know that your listeners will appreciate this. I pass out a lot of cards in the Walmart parking lot. I'm kind of hoping the Walmart general managers don't listen to your show. Because,
so that was you.
That was me.
I found about 6 of them on my windshield.
Yeah.
By the way, one of them got into the motor. Thank you very much.
And it turns out, in my view, that the Walmart parking lot is actually
Now, which Walmart? Which one?
Oh, all of them.
Oh,
I've got like 7 or 8
Okay.
favorites, and I rotate
I
so
haven't
that I
heard
don't.
that one, so that's good strategy.
So that I don't
Yeah.
irritate anyone in particular. I'm an equal opportunity Walmarter.
All right.
It turns out, I believe that the parking lot is an excellent place to have a conversation. People feel a little bit more comfortable in the parking lot than they do in the threshold of their home, right? I mean, first of all, if you open your door, who's this crazy guy, and do I want to, set myself in a defensive posture to make sure he doesn't come into my kitchen? And how am I going to get rid of him? Whereas in the parking lot, all I got to do is get in my car and drive away when I get sick of this libertarian offering his opinions.
No thanks, gone.
Yeah. And what we hear a lot of is police reform being big. And I might be a little bit biased toward hearing that because being a police officer, it's a big issue for me. I'm a big pro-reform guy. I believe that there are a lot of things that we can do better as police officers.
Somebody who's been on 12 years, you've noticed things.
Yeah, there are things that we can do better. That we can.
Good point there.
We can make the labor markets more like other industries, where it's easier to fire, easier to hire, easier to pay the good ones more and the bad ones less. Better training. I think we need more involvement from our community leaders. There's just a host of things that we can do better. And so I'm a little bit biased toward hearing that in the parking lot, but I get a lot of conversations about that.
Safety. Safety's key, right?
Safety is key. And I hear a lot of people say, are you for defunding the police? And I say no. And they say, oh, thank goodness. That's a big quiz question. Are you for defunding the police? I think a lot of Democrats have made the mistake of not shouting down that slogan. I really think it's bad for communities.
Because a lot of Democrats might tell you they actually want, as a solution, to take dollars off budgets in that regard.
I think that they would tell you that. I think
if you have honest conversation, they tell you that.
Yeah. I think there are some like that. I think that it's not only is it a politically expedient thing to say in some views, but I think it's a very lazy approach. I think most people don't understand police reform. And to be fair, if I weren't a police officer, I would think it would be a very difficult thing to understand. Indeed, part and parcel of the problem is that it's opaque, right? Part of the reform that we need is to make, for example, discipline, but also hiring and firing and management and training more transparent to the public. We need it to be more responsive. That's part of the reason why I say we need community leaders more involved. But as far as the politics go, Republicans are just set up against it. I think that they feel that the police unions aren't there yet, and so they don't want to get too far out in front of them. And it is true, the rank and file is very nervous about any number of aspects of reform. But that's where the hard work comes in. And I don't think I didn't come on your show to bash Republicans and Democrats. I got friends in both houses and love them all, right? But I do think that this idea of defunding is just an unwillingness or unfamiliarity to engage in the hard work.
And truth be told, Mike's down here 20 years, but he hails from Chicago, the Windy City. And we all know what has happened to the Windy City as far as the crime and everything else. So you kind of have a good feel. It's
horrible. It would be horrible to see in any city, right? But the city outside of which I grew up, inside of which the only baseball team worth rooting for is housed, the Chicago Cubs, of course.
There you go.
Yeah.
You had to throw that in.
And I had to throw that in there. I've been working on getting it on your show for years, and finally
it's good
made
to have
that
one
happen.
of your guys, though, and Anthony Rizzo playing first base for me in the Bronx. But that's a whole other. See, you and I could probably do another show down the road.
Yeah,
but we'll talk about that.
And don't let me bump into him, or I'll put him in a potato sack and drag him back to where he belongs.
You will have him back for free agency.
Well, I certainly hope so.
Guys.
I'm actually a fan of his, and if he calls me, I'll set him up with some libertarian literature.
He is Mr. Yankee all over when you look at him, but that's a whole nother story. So you're getting good reaction. We know safety and everything else.
Yeah, I don't want to leave Chicago just for a second, because you did put your finger on something really, really important.
Yeah.
What's going on in Chicago, there's layers, obviously. There's layers of what's going on in Chicago, and the mayor has not done a good job of supporting the police, but whether the community trusts the police or not, that's not really the crux of the matter, right? what leads to this violence, this gun violence, is not a problem with trusting the police, and it's not a problem with guns per se. What touches it off is street crime.
Gangs and everything else.
Gangs and everything else. Almost all of the murders are related to street crime in one sense or another. That may not be the immediate cause. It may be retribution, but if you peel the onion back far enough, you're going to see at the core street crime, typically drugs, right? Typically moving drugs. Sometimes it's turf, sometimes it's payments. But this is where it all begins. Yeah. And in my view, one of the big things that we need to do is to reform the criminalization of victimless activities like drugs. If you know, we are soon as a nation going to put behind us the criminalization of marijuana.
Yeah.
And then I think it's time to stepwise move toward the decriminalization of other things that are, to be honest, less bad for you and less addictive than, for example, alcohol. And I'm not advocating that these things are, you know, either good for you or something you ought to participate in. And we have a huge opiate addiction problem in the United States, right? A huge problem. But I don't think that criminalizing it has helped us.
Well, we have clogged the courts up, but then people will tell you also, okay, so if we reform, which we've done in a lot of spots around the country with bail and everything else, how does one give the judges back their powers? That's one of the key things.
It's very difficult, and we've made a lot of progress with drug courts, for example, that have some flexibility to behave differently than other courts. But as police officers, we need flexibility to treat certain situations differently. So many people don't call us, of course, because they're afraid of going to jail. Now, in Florida, we have, and in most states, by the way, we have state law that protects people who, you know, call for a medical problem. They're not going to go to jail. But people don't realize that. And they also don't call if they don't have a medical problem, but do have an addiction problem because they're afraid of who's going to show up. Yeah. Right? You know, we try not to arrest for simple possession. But, you know, this is a huge gray area, and it's illegal, and people still can go to jail for it. And it's a problem. And never mind the ethics, just the blocking and tackling of how it works, and has the war on drugs helped us as a nation? Put the ethics aside. And as a libertarian, I would argue that I just have an ethical problem with the government telling you what you can and cannot do with your body. Right. But never mind the ethics. Just as a practical matter, it hasn't worked. We got to try something different.
Something else. You know, just one thing on Chicago, the thing that really gets me, we're so used to the shootings and everything else in our big cities, but when 3-year-olds get shot and 8-year-olds get shot.
Breaks your heart.
Kids in car seats, you know, in the midst of the crosshairs of gunfire. I mean, it's unbelievable.
It breaks your heart.
And the thing with the drugs, you know, the fentanyl and everything else that we're battling right now, which is as toxic as anything in the world right now with this fentanyl.
And this is what destroys so many communities.
No question.
You know, the addictions and the drugs, the street crime, and then the violence and the gangs, and it propels poverty. Poverty and economic development have been something that I've been interested in for a long, long time. My first career was as an economist. I was a professional economist for, depending on your definition of economist, for going on 20 years. I worked on budget issues for the White House for a couple of years, and worked for trade associations and other agencies, and spent a lot of work on economic development and poverty. And I truly believe that the biggest reason why we have what I would call persistent intergenerational poverty, just this poverty that people cannot escape from, especially in our urban areas, the biggest problem we have is bad public policy. At the bottom rung of the economic ladder, our economy doesn't work the same way as at the top rung. It's just very difficult to escape your situation. And so I think we need to be trying new things as far as public policy go.
A lot of people like to have that insertion as far as politics is concerned. Sometimes, you know, it becomes flat, and that's why people look for change. You know, that's the thing. Hey, if you're tuning in, Mike Tomat's my guest. He's running via the Libertarian Party. The 20th congressional big election is coming up within the 7-week mark here. It's unbelievable how fast time has gone. You know, miracles happen. We've seen it many a time, if you want to call it that. But let's just put it in perspective. Mike Termott heads to Washington.
Yeah.
You see the vast division that has taken place. Both sides just cannot agree on anything.
Right.
Okay, we know that.
Right.
And that's a problem. I always remember Rick Scott, who said in his senatorial debut within weeks of getting to Washington that he has never seen anything so dysfunctional. And you could really tell when Rick Scott said this that this was an issue because he can't get anything done.
Yeah.
How does the Termott way of doing things, if you head over to Capitol Hill,
Right.
How does your voice get heard? How do you make that difference of trying to bring people together?
Well, first of all,
rather than apart.
Yeah, I appreciate that. You find the things that we have in common, and that's going to be ethics. I am a big believer that you don't find common ground in the movement of individual pieces of legislation. You've got to find common ground in what it is that you care about first. Whether you define that as ethics and morals or whether you define that in ways that you can make your constituents better, you can find common ground. But you've got to stop preening for the camera for 60-second sound bites. And to do that, you need to stop worrying about the movement of particular pieces, right? You need to stop worrying about a particular bill. So I would have absolutely no interest in moving a piece of legislation when I got there. My voice would be very different just because of that, by the way. Never mind what you're talking about. How you talk about it would be very, very different because I would be talking about more fundamental issues. You know, how we treat people, for example. By criminalizing behavior and then throwing money at poverty, I mean, at some point you've got to sit and say, you know, what are we doing? We have to have a more important discussion than are you or are you not for a bill in Texas that requires voter ID? Okay? Because when you focus on something relatively narrow and then blow it out of proportion as though this were the second coming of Jim Crow, you have literally gone off your political rails. They cannot have a conversation in Texas about anything because they have decided it's worth dying for whether or not this particular bill gets moved.
Yeah.
Right?
Texas has been in the spotlight just a little bit, I would say.
Just a little bit. On the other hand, if politicians on both sides were to say, we agree everyone ought to have the right to vote. We agree we ought to make it as easy as possible. We agree that we're going to do everything we can to reach that and then talk to each other first. But no one has an interest in doing that. What they do is they caucus first, develop the bill, and then try to ram it down each other's throat because that's how you get on television. So it's the nature of the conversation that you're going to have when you decide what your objectives are. If your objective is to get on TV and to look good for 90 seconds at a time, which it is for too many people, this is how to do it.
Well, listen, everybody talks about term limits, and I say it all the time on radio. We have term limits in place. The people have the right to not elect the same dreck term after term after term. So terminate them. But it never happens that way, does it?
It never happens. Well, we shouldn't say never, but infrequently, right?
I hear you.
All too infrequently, it just doesn't happen that way. And as a libertarian, I want to say, look, everyone ought to have the right to elect whoever they want, even if it's some dingleberry who's been in there for 20 years. If you still want her or him, then you ought to have the right to do that. But again, separating ethics from practicality, that's a nice ethic.
Yeah.
But the practical aspect of it is maybe this, term limits are truly a bad idea whose time has come. It would be a restriction on our ability to vote for whomever we want. Maybe, and in my view, that's ethically not a good thing, but maybe it's a bad idea.
I think for the higher offices, term limits are not, like the president have always said, make it one term, 6 years. I mean, if you can't get things done in 6 years, you know what? Something's wrong.
Yeah.
Because after 4, if your attention is focused on the re-election and not focusing on the current situation, then you got a problem. We saw what happened.
Well, that's right. And
Over
people
the last
like the
couple-
idea of being able to go to 8 years if they get the 4-year right to vote again.
Exactly.
But I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
It would be nice just to give them one stretch of 6. On the other hand, consider what happens if after 2
Yeah.
you think he or she is the biggest schmuck on the block and you want him out. All of a sudden, Jay is saying, "What? Whose idea was the 6-year gig?"
Well, it was me. And Richard Milhouse Nixon, by the way. We were way back in time. Hey, Mark Tabat's my guest. We got a couple of minutes left. He's running for Congress. He'll be part of the Libertarian Party when you head to those polls, which is coming up soon. So, in essence, the 20th is a weird geographical district. My good, I've never seen anything like this.
No, you probably
Broward.
haven't, and neither have I. It's got 2 pieces of Broward and a piece of Palm Beach
Yeah.
County, and they're all hooked up by a mass of the Everglades. Most of our constituents are actually alligators. I don't know if you're aware of that.
You know what? I find that to be a crock.
Yeah, well, we have...
But what do I know?
Yeah, he doesn't know anything. He knows a lot about bad jokes, and that's about it. We have something like 800,000 humans and about 900,000 alligators in our district.
There you go.
It's gerrymandered to be exceptionally
At
blue,
least you go
like
to
we
the poll in
discussed.
nice-looking shoes.
No, you don't. You go in Crocs.
All right, Tamat's taking a piece of the... But it's kind of a weird one, though.
Of course, it's weird.
Yeah.
And I'd like to clarify one point,
Yeah.
because it is a weird situation all the way around. The November primary coming up is for the Republicans and the Democrats.
Yeah.
The Republicans need to battle out. The Democrats need to battle it out. They'll win.
You're unopposed.
I'm
right?
unopposed. There is no such thing as a second
So you're
libertarian crazy enough to
You're gonna be
try
there-
this.
You're going to be there on January the 11th, no matter what.
I'm going to be there January 11th no matter what.
So you get a pass.
As a matter of fact, thanks for the great line. I may put that on my next poster. I'm going to be there January 11 no matter what.
You can use that.
I may go to Washington no matter
If you want
what.
to reference me in parentheses, you can. Mention the show, Titans of the Palm Beach.
And by the way, I promise to accept the results of the election. Okay? If Barbara wins,
You heard it here first.
if
folks.
Barbara wins, I will help pack her stuff and move her. I am not going to fly in, claim the office, and make her evict me.
There you go. Tamam might be up for a second interview. He's guaranteed that right here at the Oldies. So, it is what it is. But basically, I can't believe we're almost out of time here. But the overall message that you want to send to the listenership right now
Is that liberty is good for you. People need to have more choice in their lives, to be treated like adults by their government. Government only has the power that we allow to the government. And we can all tee-hee-hee about the masks, and we can get mad at each other about the vaccines, right? My concern is what happens when we roll over on these things. Look, I'm vaccinated, right? My beautiful wife, is sitting here to my left.
how are you?
I drag her everywhere so that people don't think I'm a complete buffoon. I've done something right in my life.
It is a good thing she's here today, but that's okay.
It is a good thing, and she tells me to slow down the expressway.
Whose wife doesn't?
Yeah. I can say your wife has never told
I'm
me
on
to slow
Boynton
down the
Beach
expressway.
Boulevard. Believe me, you should see what I get.
I
That's another
do
thing.
worry about it turning into something more important over time,
Yeah.
more important over time, more important over time, and pretty soon we've ceded all kinds of elements of our personal ability to make decisions to the government. The big one that bothers me, that's not on everyone's radar screen, is schools. I believe the biggest, number one reason why we cannot escape poverty in District 20 is because we have crappy public schools, and I believe the reason for that is because we don't have competition, and that's because the schools in the public sphere have a monopoly over the use of publicly raised funds. We need private schools to be able to compete.
I mean, listen, that is a big topic, and you and I will talk about that, hopefully down the road.
We will.
And I look forward to having you back.
It's been a great pleasure. I'm sorry that this is not an 8-hour program, but
Should be.
It should be. I think you deserve it. I think
Thank you.
run a very good program here.
Thank you.
And I'm pretty sure that together you and I could talk for 8 hours.
Well, listen, I could probably talk to you for 12, but that's all. I've enjoyed it. I really have. It's interesting. I'll say this. I've interviewed libertarian candidates before. Nobody like Mike Termott. I got to tell you, it's been a pleasure.
Well, it's been my pleasure. There's nobody like Jay Oliver.
Oh, you heard it here first.
I didn't say that was a good thing or a bad thing.
Okay. Mike Termott is running for Congress. Yeah, he is guaranteed another day in the sun come January the 11th, no question. But it's good to get his viewpoints and everything else. You'll hear more from him. Mike running for Congress. Can't thank you enough. Mike and his lovely wife. Jay Oliver here, ladies and gentlemen. Until next week, enjoy the rest of your Saturday and look forward to bringing you another round of Titans of the Palm Beaches.
Wow, that's a great show. I want to listen to that show.
Yes, well done, both of you. That